Good morning, very warm welcome as we come together for this CMD day as we look at building effectively as teams one with another, not only in our respective LMAs but also in our diocese as a whole.
Teams, where do you start? We are involved in teams on a multiple of levels. Most notably, we have our local ministry areas and we are forming new teams. But teams exist in all aspects of our lives. We've got our sports teams, we've got social teams. I'm sure you can think of many other teams that you're involved with. Organisations rely on teams. If our teams are not working effectively, then our organisations aren't going to work effectively either. And good leadership is essential within the team context. So we need to understand a multiple number of factors to make that team work effectively. And in the limited time I have available today, I'm going to draw out some of those key management models and theories that I hope will be of use to you. But I'm going to start by asking an open question: what is a team? Would anybody like to make any suggestions? What does a team mean to you?
Is it a group of individuals brought together with a common aim?
Can you take my notes from the table?
No!
Yeah, that's very, very close. That's a very good definition. Thank you. Well, we've got a fantastic start. I've got two quotations to share with you. What is a team? The first is from an academic. A team is a small number of people with complementary skills who are committed to a common purpose, a set of performance goals, and an approach for which they hold themselves mutually accountable. And the second definition is from the Chartered Management Institute that I'll be referring to a lot today. A team is more than just a group of people who happen to work together. It is a group of people working towards common goals and objectives and sharing responsibility for the outcomes. So we've got two quite similar definitions. But what are those key elements that jump out to you of those definitions and how they apply to us in ministry?
Common purpose.
Yes.
Because I think that's crucial. Without that, it's not a team, obviously.
Yeah, most definitely. Any other thoughts?
Accepting, well, the element of responsibility and accountability.
Yes. Yeah,
within
definitely.
that.
I think it's the collaboration as well, because like it says in the second quote, more than just a group of people who happen to be working together. That's just a group of people. That's not a team.
I think when you see from those two definitions, there are multiple aspects of them that make a team a very distinctive concept. I just put this in because I like the picture. It's quite a famous quote, I'm sure you'll all be familiar with, again by an author and management academic, John Maxwell. Teamwork makes the dream work. And I think what a great example of teams. We are all like worker ants. But the thing that really jumped out to me is the common purpose, the shared achievement of a common goal or objective. I'm sure every single one of us here today is quite clear on what our goals and objectives are every day. When we wake up in the morning, you know exactly what we want to achieve. You don't?
First cup of tea.
I like the cup of tea. That's just, you've just answered my first question. That was going to be
staying alive.
what goals or objectives do you have in your ministry teams, and are they clear and achievable? I think the silence probably answers that question. But I would just ask, as an open forum, what would you think our one key priority be? If you had to pick a big arrow, what would your big arrow be going forward from today?
New disciples.
New disciples. Right, yes. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Children,
Yeah.
because they are the future. And we're losing them too quickly, too easily. And once you lose them, you don't get them back.
Yeah, but 20, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds would also be very welcome.
As we go through the day, I am going to be highlighting a number of different sort of management theories and models, which I hope will be of help. The first model is Adair's action-centred leadership. I don't know if anybody's heard of this before today. This model defines leadership in terms of those three overlapping areas of responsibility or concerns, which are in relationship with each other. You can't separate them. Each element is of equal importance, and success comes from achieving the right balance of those three different elements. Certain functions need to be performed to satisfy each of them, and they're not necessarily performed by one person. They can be delegated as appropriate. However, the leader ultimately remains responsible for the achievement.
Just give us an example, if you would.
So try to look at the local ministry area. As a local ministry area, we comprise an individual roles. We are all individuals. And as a leader, you're often isolated or alone in that leadership role. You may be part of leadership teams with other LMAs, but you are the leader of that team. But if you can achieve what we want to achieve, we need to use the team. We can't do everything ourselves. We rely very heavily on volunteers within our LMAs. We've got some fantastic treasurers, church wardens, a multiple of people who help us achieve our objectives. But we also need to be clear on what our task is. Because if we don't know what our task is, how can we then focus on what we want to achieve? I think the big gap for me is around that sort of strategy, that clear vision. What do we want to achieve as a Church in Wales? What do we want to achieve as an LMA? And it's just being aware that we can't do that in isolation. We need to consider these three elements within our LMAs to achieve our objective, which is at the centre of the diagram.
But that also needs to fit in a wider structure, because there's no point in an LMA having a strategic direction, deciding what their strategic direction is, and then 6 months later the diocese decides, oh no, that's not the strategic direction anymore, we're doing something different. All of it needs to mesh together so that everybody is working, as you say, for the right task, and sadly that's not what we're seeing.
And again, this is a model that can be implemented at whatever level of the organisation. But as leaders, we are all leaders within our respective ministry. This model is just setting out those three things that we need to focus our attention on. We need to focus on individuals, we need to focus on team, and we need to focus on task. So in task, we need to identify our aims and vision. What resources do we need? Who's responsible for doing what? How do we know we've achieved what we set out to achieve? Do we measure performance? Again, we are reliant on individuals who we need their support to achieve what we want to achieve. Being a leader, we need to develop people. We need to make sure they've got the skills and knowledge that they need. I use the example of treasurers. We've now got an electronic system, which was obviously a key training lead for our treasurers to get their heads around. And we need to utilise each individual's strengths and abilities. We've got so many gifted people within our ministry teams. We need to maximise how we use that skill and experience. And as a team, we need to have standards of behaviour. We need to know what's expected of us. I'll discuss a little bit more those stages of team development, the forming, storming, norming. We need to anticipate and resolve team conflict, because I think team conflict is one of the biggest challenges we face, and it's inevitable we're going to experience that on a regular basis. We need to develop morale and team spirit. If that's not there, then people aren't going to be engaged in what they're trying to do. Just to confuse things, not all groups are teams. The source is there, the discipline of teams. It's an academic publication, but this highlights the fact that there are differences between teams and working groups. As a working group, you've got a clear leader, individual accountability. The group's purpose is the same as the organisational's mission. Individual work produces the goals achieved. Runs efficient meetings, I'm sure we'd all like to see that. Measures its effectiveness indirectly, and discusses, decides and delegates. That all sounds pretty good. But what is a team? And the team is distinctive because it has shared leadership roles. Individuals are mutually accountable. That responsibility is there for achieving what we want to achieve. There's a specific purpose for that team. That team itself delivers. There's collective work products as opposed to individual work products. There's open-minded discussion, active problem solving. We measure performance directly by assessing our collective work products. We discuss, decide and do real work together. And I think if you think of some of those sports teams we can think of, those successful teams have a team approach, they have mutual accountability, they work together rather than working in isolation. And I think one of the dangers historically of ministry has been that we do tend to work in isolation. But the ministry teams now provide us with a new opportunity going forward. Again, I'm sure this is a model you will all be familiar with. The stages of team development. The forming, storming, norming and performing. So when we form, the team comes together for the first time and starts that process of building relationships. That's a stage we've hopefully all passed through within our LMAs. I suspect many of us are still in stage 2, that storming stage. Team members vie for positions, they tend to establish themselves. Cliques and factions can form. Different ideas compete for priority. Stage 3 is norming. That's when we start settling down to harmonious working together. We move forward by agreeing on those rules and values we wish to adhere to. And that's where teams begin to trust themselves. And then finally in stage 4, that's where we start the stage of performance. That's when the teams start working effectively together. The difficulties of stage development is how long do we have consistency? Because we are constantly changing, people move around, new people join the teams. And when this happens, we don't ever achieve that performance stage. We keep going back to the beginning. We start forming, we start storming. And those are the 2 stages the teams often find themselves in. But I'm sure you're all aware of these stages. I'm sure this is something you will have covered many times in the past. The point I want to make is, where do we as leaders come into this equation? Because the stages of team development influence what our style of leadership should be. Again, it's quite self-explanatory, but in the forming stage it needs clear direction. It needs you as a leader to take control, to direct people, assign straightforward tasks. And as the team goes into the storming stage, that's when you need a more coaching approach to resolve conflict, to negotiate, to try to reach consensus as a team. A very difficult thing to do. As the group moves to that norming stage, the leader needs to be facilitating, to provide direction, recognise individual and group performance, but provide learning opportunities. When you're performing, that's when the team is working well. That's when you as a leader can take your foot off the gas. You can delegate. You can pass responsibility on to other people. You share decision making and problem solving. How much easier would our lives if our teams reached performing stage? And finally, when we come to the adjourning stage, that's when the team closes and disbands. That's probably a stage many teams will not reach. It'll only apply perhaps to project teams or specific task-related teams. But that adjourning stage is hugely important and has been seen to have huge benefits for well-being within that team. Well-being is so important, and it brings a sense of closure to the team who may have built up relationships with each other. Team effectiveness. It's been shown again and again that the most effective teams, the most successful companies, are those with a mix of different people who bring a range of different behaviours. It's very easy, we look at all the problems and challenges we face, thinking how on earth are we going to get through them? I'm worrying at the moment, Jeff, about how I'm going to pay my ministry share. I'll share that with you later. But we've all got different challenges and burdens. I'm actually encouraged. I'm greatly enthusiastic and encouraged by the people we see coming forward, not only into ordained ministry, our NSM locals, we've got our readers, but also those members of our congregations, those important volunteers who are contributing to the life of the church. And I'm so encouraged by those skills and gifts that everybody is bringing. This is a new model, this isn't something I'd come across before. but I think it's quite salient to the point under consideration. Again, this is taken from ministry insights, and they identify the law of difference. And they identify just two paths we can take as we observe others who are different to ourselves, the differences between us. We can value another individual's differences and focus on their strengths, or we can judge another individual's differences and focus on their differences. What are your thoughts on that distinction?
It's still subjective because you are viewing it from your opinion. So to say someone else's, one might, let's put point fingers at me. Supposing I'm finding something annoying about someone, it says more about me than about the individual, and that, every characteristic is neither a weakness or a strength. It can be both.
And I think it's very easy to judge weaknesses, to identify weaknesses in others. It's less easy or straightforward when we identify and value those differences. And again, I don't know if it's a psychological thing or it's just a natural predisposition, but we tend to judge and see differences as weaknesses, not value differences as strengths.
I think it's Thomas Merton that said, before we look at anybody else's differences, we have to look at ourselves first. And the thing is, I don't see anything particularly negative in either of those things, because the thing is, if we can truly recognise the strengths and weaknesses in ourselves, then it is not beyond us to be able to help those with strengths and to enable those with weaknesses. And I think this is the important thing that we as priests should be doing in the vineyards which we tend. And that is to enable people to see the good and the bad in themselves, to enable what is bad to fade and what is good to grow.
So why do things go wrong in teams? It's inevitable that things will and can go wrong. But I'd like to share with you yet another model of something that identifies the reasons why things go wrong. Patrick Lencioni was president of a management consulting firm, the Table Group, and he also wrote a book appropriately entitled The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And in his research of more than 500 teams that he surveyed, he identified the key 5 dysfunctions as displayed on the model: an absence of trust, a fear of conflict, a lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and an intention to results. So, firstly, the key one is absence of trust. And this was identified as the most severe dysfunction that a team can have. Without trust, almost anything else is impossible. And team members can show their lack of trust when they hold grudges, don't ask for help or give feedback, hide their mistakes, and find ways to avoid spending time together. Second key is fear of conflict. And as we say, conflict is inevitable. When it happens, when there's a solid sense of trust on both sides, conflict can be effectively managed. But signs that your team might fear conflict include the following: everyone agreeing with everyone else, or hiding or holding back on the real issues, and team members talking about other people behind their backs. There's not enough time today to focus on all 5 elements, so as I go forward in the presentation, I'm going to particularly focus on trust and conflict. Teams that lack commitment can often delay making important decisions. And a lack of commitment can also directly relate to a fear of conflict. And people may be suffering from a lack of commitment if they don't support decisions made in the team, miss opportunities, or go over discussions again and again without taking any action. Avoidance of team accountability. People who avoid team accountability don't challenge one another about team actions or mistakes. And team members may be avoiding accountability if they resent each other for having differences, rely on the team leader to identify mistakes, avoid direct conversations about performance, and allow the team to fail without making a determined effort to avoid this. And finally, the inattention to team objectives. This happens when people are working towards objectives that don't actually help the team meet its overall goal. Awareness of these elements allows us to take action. And if you do further research on Lynn, he does give different strategies and advice on how to deal with each of these. There's too much in there, just this one model alone, to consider them all today. So I'm going to pull out just the two: trust and conflict. So firstly, the importance of trust. What is trust? A quote from another academic in another book identifies, "It is more important to be able to respect and work with colleagues, feeling they will do what they promise. Being reliable and trustworthy is far more powerful than liking each other." And the reality is we all need to be professional in our roles. But if you have trust amongst yourselves and your team members, that's going to make it far easier to work as part of that team. And the reality is, trust is an important element in a wide variety of organisations. And one of the models I just want to highlight is, firstly, the three key elements of trust. Trust relies on positive relationships, consistency, and good judgment. How do we achieve positive relationships? To stay in touch with the issues and concerns of others. Generate cooperation between your team and resolving conflict. Good judgment is a factor where people will trust a leader to the extent to which a leader is well informed and knowledgeable. Others trust their ideas and opinions. Others seek after their opinions, and they can anticipate and respond quickly to problems. And finally, consistency. A role model and a good example. They walk the talk, they honour their commitments and keep promises. We have a second model. I'll just run through it quickly. You can read for yourselves what's on the screen. This is from the Chartered Management Institute, and they identify the ABCD of trust: being able, believable, connected, and dependable. And I'm sure you can see the correlations between this and the previous model of those key qualities that we look for. Somebody that's capable, that is experienced. Somebody who acts with integrity. Somebody who cares about others. Somebody who's reliable and can be relied upon. Again, all obvious qualities, but how often do we actually demonstrate these in our own leadership? And the research found that the level of trust in a leader correlates with how effective colleagues think that leader is in the workplace. So trust, again, is very, very essential to all that we do. Managing conflict. What is conflict? Anybody like to throw anything to the hat? What does conflict mean to you? Is it disagreement conflict?
No,
No,
necessarily.
not necessarily.
Why not?
Because you can disagree well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Any other thoughts?
There's a scripture in the Bible that says iron sharpens iron, and that sense of differing views. I remember when I was training in St Michael's College, what I liked about it, that it was non-partisan, as in it wasn't one specific tradition, that we had many of our best discussions over lunch, actually, not in the lectures, with people with very different traditions and backgrounds. It was very enriching.
The absence of reconciliation.
Yeah. I like that word reconciliation. I will be picking up on it again shortly. But yeah.
Sometimes one can feel that people are playing the man, not the ball.
Could you enlarge that?
that sometimes if there is a disagreement about when things become personal rather than about the issue which is supposedly under discussion.
Definitely, very, very true indeed. I've got 3 quotes which are from a secular context. Conflict is an expressed struggle between at least 2 interdependent parties who perceive incompatible goals, scarce resources and interference. And that makes you think perhaps of that international conflict, the conflict between countries. All those wars in the world seem to be over scarce resources or land. I quite like this one because, as we said, conflict and difference are different things. But conflict equals difference plus tension. So conflict is that tension we experience when a difference is discovered, when differences are not managed well. And then the final quick definition: conflicts are power struggles over differences. And that's from the Hugh Halberstadt, Managing Church Conflict. We're in a safe learning environment, but I actually related to one personal conflict I had to deal with within the church environment, and I described it as a turf war. It was quite a severe conflict, but for me it was like a turf war. Very, very strongly entrenched parties who saw that they owned that area, they owned that turf, and it wasn't anybody else's place to come in and to take that territory from them. I never thought I'd use that term in the context of a church environment. Again, from the Chartered Management Institute, they identify the 5 main causes of conflict within teams. Information or misinformation. How often has somebody got the wrong end of a stick, misunderstood, or had incomplete or ambiguous information? The environment. Something in the environment leads to conflict. It could be an obstacle, it could be your role. Can anybody think of environmental factors that have resulted in conflict for themselves?
The little things like if you've got one person sort of sitting behind a desk at the front and everybody else is on little chairs out there, and sort of things that can implicitly power dynamics and things like that. Physical context of meetings.
Yeah, without a doubt. There are elements of the environment that we can control, but there are also elements of the environment that we can't control. The example it's given here is enlist the help of IT. So that's one environmental factor that could have easily resulted in conflict today. Everybody got fed up of waiting for the IT to work and you all stormed out. Again, another area of those 5 minutes is skills. People lack the appropriate skills for doing their work. Tick the IT box again. But values. Values can cause unintended conflicts. We all have different values on a different basis. And as a leader, our role is that of a mediator, to help guide the conflicting parties to resolve issues themselves, to keep communication clear and unambiguous. But again, there are some things we can control and other things that are outside of our own control as well. Identity, a very similar theme again. We all have an individual sense of identity, and issues that conflict with that personal identity will result in conflict. Conflict and Christianity. It's normal, it's going to be with us forever. Conflict is always related to power and the ability to influence. Conflict may be a sign that people care. I don't know what you think about that. But people are passionate about what they believe in. Our culture does not prepare us to deal well with conflict. I'll be honest, with my hand up, I'm one of those that tries to avoid it, and I'll discuss that in a little bit more detail. It's very difficult within our culture to want to tackle it head on. But Jesus and the biblical writers call us to address conflicts directly. We can grow in our effectiveness in handling conflict. Conflict always has the potential to hurt and destroy. I just want to finish up with one slide, which for me I think sums it all up. Forgiveness. Then Peter came and said to him, Lord, if another member of the church comes and sins against me, how often should I forgive? Something I think we often can forget. As many as 7 times, Jesus said to him, not 7 times, but I tell you, 77 times. The amount of sermons I've done on loving your neighbour and forgiveness, and I've been greeted with feedback, what a wonderful sermon, it's very timely, they really needed to know that. It's actually meant for you. To consider the key themes really we've discussed today. So just thrown in a team's checklist. Consider whether a team is the best option. There may be times when a team isn't the best option. There may be times when perhaps you could do things as an individual or as a pair. But there are other times when a team is inevitable and invaluable. If you do need a team, make sure there are clear objectives and the right skill set to achieve them. Considering the makeup of the team, I appreciate that isn't always within our control, but the bell-bin roles do identify the types of skills we would look for in our team members. Plan your team building strategy. Food is also good. Get the team together with food. Explore and establish operating ground rules. Identify individual strengths and motivations. See yourself as a team member. Check progress. Time meetings with care. And finally, dissolve the team. A question you may like to ask yourselves is, how effective is my team? The questions you might like to ask include, do we have a common purpose? Thinking back to that very first slide about the purpose of a team. Do we have the right mix of skills? Have we got a strong identity? Are tasks personally important? Do we give individuals the recognition they deserve? Does my team have clear and specific performance goals and measurable targets? But these are just questions you may wish to consider or not, as the case may be.